This is Adriano Autino, the CEO and founder of Space NSS International, and we are working together with the NSS and other partners in order to try to put in advance to propose to the UN to add an 18 SDG Sustainable Development Goal to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Today, in the frame of our promotion, we have today Alfred Anzaldúa. He is a member of the National Space Society Board. He is also a member of SRI, Space NSS International Board. And he will share with us today his view about the inevitability to expand humanity into space, and about some rationales about that. And I think it's a very interesting speech that I hope everybody will enjoy and help us support our initiative to go ahead. So, okay, Alfred, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
My name is Alfred Anzaldúa. I'm with National Space Society and Space Renaissance International. And I would like to take this opportunity to respond to a recent article that came out in Scientific American. And the name of the article is Why We'll Never Live in Space. And the subtitle is Medical, Financial, and Ethical Hurdles Stand in the Way of the Dream to Settle Space. Well, I think we might as well have another article similar saying that, why we will never leave Africa and go all over the globe. Why the Polynesians will never find and settle over 1,000 islands in the Pacific, etc. I think that I know that the person who wrote this, Sarah Scholes, is very sincere about what she says, but this article flies in the face of the reality of human nature, and also other factors that have to do with the facilitation of technology. So let's talk about that a little bit. I think there are basically three reasons that it is inevitable that humans will go into space. First of all, it's become affordable. All right. If you look at the cost of space from of getting into orbit from the 1960s and 1970s to the present day, you'll find that it now costs about 2.3%, in inflation adjusted dollars, 2.3% of the original cost to get into orbit. And most of that cost has that plunging in costs, not only for getting into orbit, but developing spacecraft themselves. Most of that cost has come over the last 10 years. And most of that because of a change in contracting and also SpaceX. Let's give credit where credit is due. SpaceX, with their reusable boosters, have dramatically changed downsized the cost of going into space. So that's one factor. It's become affordable, but there are other factors as well. For instance, it's exciting. And why is it exciting? It is exciting because there's risk involved at first. There will be risk involved. And it will be difficult. And there's a part of human nature, at least a percentage of the humans on this planet right now, that are attracted by risk. And if you don't believe that, check out statistics for base jumping, rock climbing, free diving, all risky behaviors, mountain climbing. Over 300 people have died climbing Mount Everest, and it's ever more popular. All these activities are. Why are they popular? Because it is hard to do, it's difficult, and because there's a risk involved. And for a segment of the population, a segment of humanity, this makes it irresistible. Irresistible. So now we have affordable, and we also have irresistible. So it's going to happen. And in fact, if you looked at the last 2 years, in the last 2 years, the number of launches into space has more than doubled. So what else is involved? Well, there are actually rational reasons as well. We just talked about affordability, which is a factor. We just talked about the irrational or illogical reason for going into space, but there are rational reasons. Here's one. The Earth is finite. Finite resources, including one resource is the surface area of the Earth, territories. Okay? So the Earth is finite resources, space is infinite. Space is infinite. So we have finite and we have infinite. So let's think about this. What should we choose? Should we stay in a finite area, a finite surface area, and continue to fight over territory as humans, or should we expand? So that's one rational reason, of course. But there are other rational reasons as well, and I just mentioned resources. Okay, so there is a second rational reason. The Earth is subject to mass extinctions. They've come in the past because of asteroid strikes, volcanism, whatever. There have been 5 mass extinctions in the past. And some people will argue that there's another mass extinction going on now. But the point is that we live in a shooting gallery. All kinds of things can happen to the Earth, and has happened to the Earth, and will happen to the Earth again. So, as they say, why do we keep all our eggs in one basket? Does that make sense? So that's another rational reason too. Really, it's time for the Earth to give birth and give birth to life in the galaxy, in the solar system first and onward. It's time for that. And in fact, that process has already started. So that process has already started, and we have a choice now. The choice is, should we allow the process to just go helter-skelter and become chaotic and destructive, or should we come together and come up with cooperative frameworks to do it in a way where there's equitable sharing and there is an orderly process to it, so that no one is left out. No one who wants to go in space should be left out. And that's important because there should be no exclusivity to this. Space is for all. Space is for all of us who are willing to work for it and willing to go for it, right? Take steps to do it, to get out there, live and work in space with supporting life forms. So over the past couple of years, we've had a doubling, more than a doubling actually, of launches into space. And there's a stampede of over 30 countries now headed for the moon, right? So how do we keep this group of countries headed for the moon? How do we keep the moon from not becoming balkanized? In other words, not being fragmented surface of the moon and actually some of the undersurface, like the lava tubes, how do we keep this from not becoming fragmented into different zones that that are basically governed locally by different entities, and how do we keep it from becoming conflictive and fighting over the finite resources of the moon? So, because we have to remember, the moon is like the Earth; it has finite resources. So, I think that the way, again, has to do with international, on an international basis, having framework agreements. But these framework agreements have to have a couple of elements in them that are extremely important. One is that they should be voluntary. Okay, so there should be a voluntary process, a cooperative, collaborative, voluntary process to come up with norms, behavioral norms, not legal norms, not yet, behavioral norms. Okay, we're talking about soft law here. Okay, for governance, basically, for sharing, for equity and sharing and participation on a cooperative basis. So, and all of these norms also should be rooted in best practices. So, how do we determine best practices? Again, the way to do it is through a cooperative, collaborative process where discussions, where everything is on the table, discussions are open, transparent, and cooperative. And I think that is the way we will deal with the moon. The moon's very important, of course, because it will serve as a training area for going deeper into space, both to Mars and also because of all the recycling and waste management that has to be done for people at a base on the moon, also to rotating habitats, which can be at L4 and L5 and other places, even in various orbits around astral objects. After all, the moon is important as a training area so that we find out as humans and supporting life forms, plants and animals, and so forth, fungus, how to live and work in space in a way where waste is used for valuable products. Everything is reused, recycled, and all that sort of know-how also in technology can be shared back with the Earth. So a training ground for the moon is a perfect training ground for other living on Mars someday, other planetary surfaces, and under those surfaces, and also for living in rotating habitats with contained atmospheres, which can create with certain rotations, pseudo-gravity so-called, and where climate can be controlled. So for all those reasons, the moon is very important. And so it's very important for us to get it right to begin with. Okay, so I would like to talk about how we could do this on an international basis. I think it's very important that we eschew the idea of having a treaty first. Why would we want to avoid a treaty first situation? Well, the reason is because treaties carried out by diplomats are often take a long time, quite arduous. Sometimes, often, or at least in the past, they haven't included the private sector very much, or at all. I think this space should be for the private sector. In fact, this private sector has to be one of the stakeholders here, one of the players. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. So with the idea of space being for all who are willing to work for it, for the benefit of all people on Earth and elsewhere. How do we go about an orderly process to do this? I think the best way, and this has to do with governance, whether you're talking about resources or actual surface place on space on the moon, I think a good way to go about it is with international framework agreements that are based on best practices, not helter-skelter, any practice. I'm talking about best practices. And how are those ascertained? Best practices. They are ascertained in a cooperative way with all the players involved, all the stakeholders involved. I think that is the way to go. Cooperative agreements that are flexible. Instead of a treaty which is static, a static unit takes a long time, it becomes a static, and then it's very hard to change. Instead of that, how about something that's adaptable, right? And also can evolve with changing circumstances and with changes in society. Not only it changes circumstances in social circumstances, but also with changes in technology. Does that make more sense to you? It does to me, and I hope it does to you. So, okay, international frameworks, agreements, all the stakeholders that are evolvable, can adapt to changing circumstances. I think that's the way to go. Okay, no, I don't think I am going to say it because I don't want to get into geopolitics. So I think I'll just wrap this up by saying maybe what we're trying to do about it with the SDG, the 18 SDG. So, okay, so I've laid out a way that we could move forward, which makes sense to me, and I hope to you. And I want to tell you a little bit now about what we're doing at the UN and also outside of the UN. We have begun the process of trying to get the UN delegates at UN COPUS first. COPUS is the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. All right. It has been meeting for many years now. And COPUS, as it's called, has a procedure where a resolution can be adopted by a delegate, by a delegation. So a state party delegation. So our idea is to get a state party to adopt, to put on the floor a resolution for an 18th SDG, a Sustainable Development Goal, for the expansion of humanity into space, expansion of humans into space with helpful life forms, in order to help fulfill the other 17 SDGs. All right, so I think the best way to explain all of that is with a separate video. So I'm going to ask our host here, Adriano Altino, to wind this video up, and we'll put out a separate video about how we are going to go about, in coordination with almost 70 other space organizations, how we are going to go about trying to get an 18th SDG for the expansion of human life into space. So we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.